Friends, fellow residents, welcome. What a delight to have everybody here this evening. I thank you so much on behalf of Jenny and I, and of course the candidates. First of all, let me acknowledge and appreciate the First Nations land on which we stand, leaders past, present and emerging, and just take a moment, if we all could, to appreciate what a joyful and wonderful place it is that we live. For all our differences, there is something that's bountiful and joyful about living in this part of Australia and indeed the world. And I think that's the one thing that does bind us all together. We have a short time together and we are going to make the best of it as best we can. I invite everybody to be generous and not least of all with technology. We had initially planned for these events to be in each of the wards to be face-to-face. For obvious reasons, that's not the case. We are going to, when questions come through the chat, and Jen will explain it in a second, we will prioritise questions coming from people from the Strzelecki ward, nonetheless understanding that as councillors elect, who are elected, you'll be governing for the whole of our Shire. The format is relatively simple. We're going to give each candidate 3 minutes to make a statement, declare their interests, why they want to be councillors. Let's be appreciative of all 7 of these people. It's an onerous task. It takes time. It's certainly not well paid. And I think we should honour all of their commitment to having a go. It's also exposing and an act of vulnerability. So I firstly want to hold them in high regard for standing at this particular time as democracy comes back to Gippsland. This is not meant to be a debate. That's a different format. This is about a conversation and predominantly a Q&A between members of the community and the would-be councillors. We are asking from those who are asking questions to please make it a question, not a statement. We ask you to be curious and of course, questions will have a point. I'm not suggesting that, but please, we don't have enough time for everybody to be making statements. Obviously, they're asking you to be generous and respectful goes without saying. As I've said, we will try and attempt to be as fair as possible. And let me be clear, Jen and I have no writing instructions. We volunteered to do this on the basis that we would be allowed to be neutral. Nobody's asked us to put forward a particular agenda. Personally, I have not written, I on purpose not withdrawn from 2 organisations I'm part of to ensure I've stayed as neutral as possible. And I've not read anybody's advertising blurb. I promise you that I will, because I take these kind of elections very seriously. We will distribute, if we don't get through all the questions, we'll distribute them at the end to the various candidates, so they in turn can use their other channels to answer the questions. This notion of being fair, some questions will be asked for particular candidates, and clearly we will ask those of those candidates. Some people wish for me to read their questions out. Others, if they're online, we will get them to talk for themselves. We are trying to ensure candidates get an equal share of time. It means that we won't always be able to ask all candidates to answer all of the questions. It just doesn't work in the time that we have. We will be finished by 9 o'clock. To repeat the format, 3 minutes from each councillor. There'll be a follow-up question, a neutral follow-up question, as best I can do that. We'll do Q&A from the community, and then we'll get each candidate 2 minutes to do a wrap. We've picked the order of the candidates speaking out of a hat. It is genuinely random. Before I go and get into this, and let's get going, and Nathan Hersey is going to go first, I'd just like to introduce to Jen, who has done so much behind the scenes here. I'm just the colour and movement. She really is the brains about this outfit, and I'd just like you to say hello to Jen. And Jen.
Thanks very much, Colin. And hi, everybody. Thank you very much to the candidates for all of the positive communication in the lead up to tonight's forum. Really optimistic that this is going to be a great discussion. Thank you on behalf of all South Gippsland. Thank you to the community members who have jumped on tonight, and there is about 70 here. So really appreciate you being here and being part of the process too.
Thank you. What a wonderful number, 70. Okay, so I'm going to keep a timer, Nathan, and I'm going to be pretty strict about time. So 30 seconds, give 30 minutes, 3 minutes, give it to a few seconds. As you get close, if it's looking like you're not winding up, I'll give you a 20-second warning. So Nathan Hersey, thank you. First of all, on behalf of the committee, thank you for standing. Could you please tell us in 3 minutes why you're standing and what you deeply care about?
Thanks, Colin, and thanks, Jen, for facilitating tonight as well. It's really it's good. It's good to have these forums so that we can have engagement with people who are going to be voting at the election starting this week. My name's Nathan Hersey. I'm 34 years old and I live in Lock Village, which is sort of at the edge of the electorate, which is a very wide spread electorate, as most of you will know, or ward in this instance. I'm married to a beautiful and intelligent woman called Lucy, who some of you may know is a very gifted artist. And we have a 2-year-old son called Hugo. If it looks a bit funny where I'm in the caravan because my 2-year-old is doing bath and bed and dinner, and it would just be way too noisy in the house. So I'm hanging out in the caravan to do this. And also, I know I look really tired. It's because I was up till 4 o'clock this morning dropping off flyers at people's letterboxes all across the area. So maybe a bad decision on the night before this, but anyway, it's done now. So I actually just want to start by saying I'm a real big fan of democracy, and I've had a lot to do with the democratic process in the past in both state, federal, and council levels. Not so much at the active level at a council sort of, you know, in a council way, but I've been very active, and I think one of the things that that is important is that everybody has an opportunity through elections to have a say and to get the council that they hopefully want, but the council that they deserve. And I think with a community like ours, it's a very unique place to live. I love it. We live here because it's where we chose to make our home. I wasn't brought up here. My wife wasn't brought up here. We've had property in South Gippsland since 2014, and we moved into Lock in 2017. But it's where we've chosen to live. And the beauty of it is that there's a lot of people who are engaged and a lot of people who really do contribute. And I talked about this the other day on a podcast that Craig has done, if anyone's seen that going around. But one of the things that's stuck with me for a long time is that the world is run by people who turn up. And all the council nominees tonight are turning up and have done throughout this time, and others before have. And everybody in our community who volunteers their time also turns up to make our community a great place. So basically, I'm nominating to council to be a representative. I don't have agendas that I've come to sort of push. I have said that from the start. I'm not getting involved in how to votes or preferencing. I understand the importance of stopping, of listening, of advocating, and of making change from a position of action. And that's the thing that I think is important. Are you saying I've got 30 seconds, Colin?
You've got 20 seconds.
10, okay. Look, for me, it's a great opportunity. I know I've got a lot to offer, and I'm looking forward to being able to contribute on a professional level to this area and to this region. But for that to happen, I actually need support from our community, and that's how we have to operate in this area. Is, you know, support goes back and forth. So, thank you,
Nathan. What is it you hope to know more about if you were elected? What is it you want to become smarter about, know more about as your term evolved?
I don't know if smart is the right word, but I would like to get to know more about this particular community. I know a lot of the history. I sit and I study history, and it's something that's very interesting to me. But it's actually about what knits this community together. That is what I would like to get to know, or learn more about as time goes on if I'm elected. Granted, I haven't been here that long, and also have been here during a pandemic, so I haven't had the opportunity that some others have. So yeah, I do want to be more involved in that way and learn in that way.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Welcome. We'll continue. Frank Hurst. Frank, tell us about your candidature and what matters to you.
All right, thanks, Colin, and thanks, Jen, for putting this on and for everybody being here. It's a terrific thing to do, as Nathan has said. I've been in the Shire for 41 years now, so I think I've almost qualified as a local. You're never too sure in some of the country areas, but I'd like to think I pretty much am by now. And I've had a fair involvement in the community across that time. I've worked with the Department of Primary Industries for many years as a dairy extension officer and later as an agroforestry officer. Bought myself a rundown farm out here at Ransby and got that looking a lot more like what I'd like it to be now, I guess. And such that I'm able to be harvesting the trees that I planted back in the 1990s, and they're able to be used in high quality buildings in Melbourne through a local sawmill and then going off to Fairwood in Melbourne. As I'm retired from the department, I've got the time to put in now, which is obviously important. There is a lot of time involved in council, and I'm aware of that to some extent, as many of you will know. I've spent 10 weeks on council before the whole council was dismissed. But the first thing that I want to try and do with my candidacy, and I guess, you know, we've all promised exactly the same thing in this regard, pretty much all of the candidates, which is great, and that is that we want a respectful council chamber. And the way I've worded it is where issues are debated openly and fully and decided on their genuine merits for the South Gippsland community. And I think if we can all get that, that'll be a good way to go. My name is Frank, and I've often been accused of being frank by nature, and I've possibly used that as an excuse sometimes as well. But I think it is important, and I don't hide things, and I do address issues, I guess. Coastal Ward people last night were saying they were all being cooperative with each other, which was wonderful. It certainly sounded like that through their whole presentation as well. Really good. So it worries me, though, that we can start off with that, everyone can start off with that ambition. And I've been exercising my mind about this lately as to how that changes or can change later on when you get into council. And one thing that occurred to me is maybe the mayoral election is a place where it starts, where people start to owe each other favours and talk behind doors and things like that. So maybe they should just lock us in a room, those who get into council the first time, and you know, say, give us a call when you've decided who's mayor. No one's going out. You all got to talk openly. No one's talking behind anybody else. Get it done. That'd be wonderful. Anyway,
Right.
Probably won't happen.
20 seconds, Frank.
Yeah, so I've, when I knew there were 3 candidates standing who I didn't know, I reached out to those 3 candidates, had a good talk to Jenny on the phone, had a cup of coffee with Nathan in Karry. We had yeah, very pleasant conversations. But unfortunately, Michael didn't want to speak to me once he found out that I had allied myself with Andrew McEwen. So that's a bit disappointing, but that's the case. I'll put it out there, and you do what you want with it.
Frank, thank you. Frank, when you talk to people outside of the Shire, how do you describe this part of the world?
Oh, look, I say how incredibly lucky we are to be here. Because again, I guess being in agriculture, I'm incredibly aware of how productive an area it is. Not that everybody doesn't know that. But it's also a very beautiful area, high rainfall area. I had a choice when I came down here of going to Shepparton or Warrnambool as alternatives, and I've never been sorry that I chose to come to work at Leongatha and to live in South Gippsland area. I love it.
Thank you. Michael Felton.
Just unmute myself and we'll be right.
We've all done that, mate. Don't worry about that. Mick.
Yep. Good evening, all. My name is Michael Felton. I'm a candidate for the South Gippsland Shire Council Strzelecki ward. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the organisers of the forum, Colin Pidd and Jen Young, my fellow candidates, and to the members of the community taking the time to be with us this evening. A little about me. I'm 47, married to my wife Nikki for the past 24 years and together for 28. I'm a father of 2 adult boys, Nathan 26 and Bradley 24, a grandfather to Ola, who's 4 in January, with another grandchild due in December on Boxing Day. I've been employed in the same job as a public servant in the field of public safety for the past 18 years. I'm a volunteer firefighter with the Lock Fire Brigade, signing up in 2015. I'm also a member of the Nyora Hall Committee since 2015, of which I'm the current president and treasurer. I live here in South Gippsland area of Nyora and have since 2009 after purchasing our property. More importantly, I'm just like most of you. I work, I pay my rates, I rely on council to collect my trash and ensure that the roads I travel on are safe. I know council are responsible for a lot more than that, but I personally don't require much. But what I am passionate about is the fact that I want my local council to be a united and properly managed organisation that has my best interest at the forefront, which in turn are your best interests as well. Council has a huge responsibility going forward and must ensure community are aware of all plans, as they are the ones that will be impacted by any decisions made. There must be a focus on partnership and consultation. We need a council that listens and consults with the community and makes decisions that are best for my town, my community, my shire, which is our towns, our communities and our shire. Believe that for the newly elected council to run successfully, we require a diverse team of councillors with a range of skills and experiences, a reflection of the community they are representing. We need a council that has no personal agendas, that respects and values all opinions and ideas, a council that advocates for all. We have had 2 years of administrators at the helm. This has come at a cost of ratepayers in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We need a fresh start, new ideas and new councillors. The debacle and embarrassment of the 2019 sackings is one situation we cannot afford to have repeated. The focus should be on correcting past mistakes and planning for the future and expecting growth for the Shire. This includes infrastructure, environmental protection and improvements by way of renewable energy, a reduction in unnecessary pollutants, better waste management, maintain roads, more footpaths, additional recreational facilities with appropriate amenities, and support for smaller towns within the Shire. The new council has a rare opportunity for a turnaround to leave the reputation of a toxic culture in the past and to build on a more respectful and inclusive environment where everybody feels valued and heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Similar question to Nathan. Democracy, at the heart of democracy is curiosity and learning, as well as principles and position.
Yep.
What is it you are curious about that you want to learn more about?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, I'm new to this. I decided a couple of years ago that I was interested in, and obviously when the opportunity came up, I put my hand up. There's going to be a lot to learn going forward, and obviously there will be people on council that have that experience, which I would obviously well and truly love to work with and take that information from them to be able to push on and get the job done. That's what it is. It's community representation. That is what it is. That's what we're elected to do, and that's what we should be doing. Okay. Nothing, no personal agendas. Just let's get the job done.
Thank you. Good on you. Thanks, Jenny Karry. Welcome. Thank you for coming, as everybody else. Please tell us more about you and what matters to you.
Thank you very much, Colin and Jenny. I'm a mother of 2, other mother of 2, and a grandmother of 3. I'm very much a person of the community, and I've lived and worked in South Gippsland Shire since 2013. Our council needs a fresh start. I'm standing for a return of good leadership, respectful relationships, community focus, improved communications, and adherence to the overarching principles of the role and powers of the council. These include innovation and continuous improvement, collaboration with other councils and governments, ongoing financial viability, taking into account regional, state and national plans and policies, planning and mitigation of climate change risks, and transparency of council decisions. This is my commitment to the people of Korumburra, Strzelecki and South Gippsland Shire. I have the skills, knowledge, interest, experience and commitment necessary to fulfill the role. And importantly, I have a clear understanding of who I am and what I stand for. I bring a mindful approach to working with people that will be beneficial to re-establishing best practice in council leadership after an awful period of disruption and dissatisfaction. I'm committed to considered growth and prosperity of our Shire and repairing our reputation. Representing my community is important to me. I listen to community, and from my connections through my work at Milpara Community House and my involvement through community volunteering, I have a diverse range of experiences that will be beneficial to me as a councillor, working with others and working for you. I have learned that ratepayers and residents of the Shire just want to live their lives with minimal disruption. They want their elected representatives to make sure there are resources available for the essential and appropriate services under the scope of council. They are interested in planning for the future and want to be part of contributing thoughts and ideas. I've been involved in a variety of different local projects. Just a few of these are the Korumburra Skate Park consultation and making sure the young people who are skate park users were part of that consultation process. The Korumburra Community Hub, Korumburra Community Meals to try to reduce vulnerability through isolation and separation, and the Korumburra Roundtable. Most recently, I was part of the Korumburra Roundtable working group that stopped the closure of the Bendigo Bank in Korumburra, a proud moment. Another long-term project has been the refurbishment of the Korumburra railway station, which has brought a mix of frustration, success, extensive lobbying, planning, negotiation, and stick-with-itness. Standing for council is an important decision and one that I've considered in depth. While becoming a councillor isn't the be-all and end-all of my life, it's a role I can do, want to do, and do well. I live a simple life, one forged in hardship and challenges, and I strive to continue learning and being curious. My journey has taught me courage, resilience, and an appreciation of what is essential and the difference between want and need. I've done my homework on what being a councillor means, and I am ready and prepared. Vote 1, Jenny Karry, number 7 on the ballot. I stand for good leadership, community focus, integrity, and commitment.
Right. Right.
Sorry?
I'm going to hold you there. You've gone way over, but thank you. I think you made it well. Jenny, if you were to be elected in 3 years' time, what would be the story you'd want people to tell about this council?
I think it would be that we're working together to create a better future, not just for our current residents, but putting the processes in place for our future generations as well. And that takes planning and collaboration with others and understanding what it's going to take to make it happen. So I'll be really pleased if we're on the pathway to that.
Thank you so much. Good on you. David Amore. David.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for tuning in to have a bit of a listen to us. So we are actually talking about the Strzelecki ward, and I thought I'd better bring that up and let everyone know. Hello. Now, the interesting thing is I've put my hand up. I've put it up a couple of times before and just missed out. But I think this time it is so critical that we take back the power of the Shire, whoever the 9 candidates are, 3 from each ward who get in. I'm very disappointed, and I've had a gutful of the 3 administrators doing what they want to do, cutting out the most important people, the ratepayers. And the ratepayers have had nothing to be able to say for almost 8 months. So I want to bring back the power through council and make council a much better place, make the candidates respectful. We know that's got to happen and going to work because we've had 2 years of administrators. I'm sure we never, ever want to see that again and what happened and what has brought this to a head. I'm a family man. I've got a partner. I've got 3 girls. I own a home in Karry. I own a business in Karry for just over 30 years. So I'm still here. So I must be doing something right. I've been heavily involved in the community with the Business Association many, many years ago, president of the Karry Tennis Club, and also been very, very lucky to be in very important committees and that through motorsport, being the president, being a committee person, working behind the scenes. And I am that person that'll ask the hard question, the question that no one wants to ask, or I think it's silly. I'm quite happy to ask it because we haven't been able to do much lately. The infrastructure of the South Gippsland Shire and how it is no better now than what it was when we had our councillors sacked. When you look at it, you've got to realise the satisfaction rate of the South Gippsland Shire at the moment is at 33%. That's an absolute fail, an absolute fail. My ambition is in the first 3 years to working together with the candidates you see last night, tonight and tomorrow night, is to bring that up to at least 45%. So people can see there is a change and a harmony, a working together, not just through the candidates, through the CEO and through all the staff. I'm really, really worried about what is happening with rates, road and waste. Now, waste is the millions of dollars that have been spent in the last 2 years, and I can't see where that has gone from. The caravan parks, Bear Street, everything like that. There is just blowouts of dollars. I've sent some 80 emails into the administrators and the Shire staff over the last 2 years. Many of them have come back unanswered, or they've answered them the way they wanted to talk to me, but not truly and correctly. Thank you for that. But most importantly, people, when you vote one, I am number one, and I'm at the top, which I'm very, very lucky to be. But please, everyone, give me a go. I'm your voice. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David, similar to the question I asked Frank, local government is not just about the Shire. It's absolutely all about the Shire, yet it's also about the boundaries. How would you describe the Shire to others who aren't live where we all live?
Well, they're very unlucky. I can honestly say where we are, it's beautiful, it's fantastic, it's a food source. We've got 28 towns, and people have got to realise that, from little towns of Nyora, Poowong, Fish Creek, even smaller as you get down to the other end. But what a lot of people don't realise, to get to Wilson's Prom, we need better roads. And Wilson's Prom is our jewel at the end of our Shire, and we need to make sure that we use that for the benefit of every town and every individual and every ratepayer to have a bonus. We are very lucky where we are.
Thanks, mate. Thank you very much. Andrew McEwen. Andrew, talk to us about what you care about and why you're standing.
Thank you, Colin and Jen. Our land is very special and it has its own natural beauty. The land of the Bunurong and the Gunai has a long history of over 60,000 years. When our first settlers came here over 100 years ago, they called this land the Promised Land. They called it the land of milk and honey. They developed a unique culture of working for the common good and mutual support for each other. Out of that, they've developed a wealth of assets which we all now enjoy and share across the 28 towns and villages. But probably more importantly, they built a culture which is very powerful of mutual support, self-help and reliance. Personally, I'm deeply committed and work in the communities. I'm involved actively in over 12 local groups. But I believe in the end, to get to where we all are saying we need to be, we need to draw on the lessons of the heritage and commit to work again for the common good. Councils matter for people in the end. A great council is one that works in strong partnership with its community. trusted and respected, that is open and transparent, has affordable rates and equity in provisions of services. Unfortunately, you can't say that that's what South Gippsland Shire has been in the last 10 years. As David inferred, in the last 10 years, we've dropped 35% in our level of community satisfaction. A sign of a council of 30%, 31%, that it's basically failed over time. Our rates are 25% higher than the large rural shires that are our equivalents. Our smaller towns haven't got a fair share of resources. In the past 2 years, council has stopped allowing people to come in and ask questions and to make public presentations. In my view, we need a decisive break with the past, and we need to draw on the heritage that was developed by our first settlers. My approach, if elected, is to be involved in creating a council that's open, revitalised, inclusive, and one that can be trusted. Building a council that we can all be proud of and respect. Restoring trust in council will require us to strengthen participatory forms of democracy. We need to restore in council the right for people to come in and ask a question and make a presentation. Like Trudeau in Canada, where cabinet subcommittees are actually open to the people, where there's not confidential matters, I believe we should have our committees and our briefing sessions where there's no confidential matters open to. We need to work for the benefit of the whole community and not special interests. My personal commitment is to develop a strategy that will allow us to reduce rates. We need to have a council that's committed to transparency and accountability. In my view, we need to use a citizens' jury to help develop a 10-year vision of where we want to head. We need to declare a climate emergency and develop a just transition plan. In the end, as I think was it Nathan said, or Mick, we need to have a balance of people. We need people with a diversity of backgrounds and skills who are committed to work together. I have no development interests. I have no political engagement. I come with a commitment that we need to work together to restore democracy, work in partnership with the community, help build a functional council that we can all respect.
I need you to conclude, Andrew. Thank
Sorry?
you. I need you to conclude.
I have.
Perfect timing. Andrew, what is it that you think you need to discover if you were elected as a councillor in the next 3 years to enhance the council in the region?
I think we need a new form of politics and leadership. We've got a community generally that is grossly dissatisfied with basically all levels of government and people. To do that, we have to learn new skills and have a new understanding of how you actually do work together in a collaborative way. You can talk about it, but the proof in the end is going to be in the pudding of how we all learn individually and collectively how to actually work as a collaborative leadership team, how we can work in partnership with the community.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Least but not last, last but not least, sorry, Jim. Jim Forbes.
You're forgiven, Colin.
I appreciate that.
Well, welcome to all residents and ratepayers in the Strzelecki ward. And yes, my name's Jim Forbes. I've lived here in Poowong for 44 years and have raised 3 sons in this area. And I believe that this is one of the best parts of the world. Now, there are obvious reasons as to why I'm standing, because I'm wanting to see better outcomes than the last council. But what's of interest to me is that I have a real connectedness to the people in the area. And I have been part of a service club, the Apex Club, for more than 20 years, also with the Rec Reserve Committee, the swimming pool, the sports centre, and the list goes on. And to me, that is the fundamental part, if you're going to stand for council, is to be in touch with the people that you're asking for their support to represent you in a democracy. Councils can sometimes be a bit like families. Whilst one can say you can choose your friends, you ultimately cannot choose who the other 8 councillors will be. And that is where the ability to respect different points of view and to work effectively with each other for the best outcomes is essential. Now, I have some ideas on projects I would like to see introduced into this first term of councillors coming back. Things such as a planning permit tracker, where people that have planning permits in could follow and see where those permits are situated at. One of the complaints I often hear is about response times from officers at the council, and that needs to be improved. That could be done through a KPI with the Chief Executive Officer, recognising that council only employs one person, and that's the Chief Executive Officer. There's comments about rates. I believe the vacant rate at 200% is grossly unfair. The people with those vacant blocks do not have the use of the services, but are being charged double of what a residential normal block would be. Council, to me, at the local government level, it still comes back to the basics of roads, rates, rubbish, recreation and community service, because that's really what council is. It's delivering services at the grassroots level. And I don't believe in interfering and getting involved in state and federal issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. If you were elected, what would you want the story to be about this council in 3 years' time?
In 3 years' time, I'd like to see trust restored with the community. I'd like to see towns, regardless of size, have faith in getting supported. And I would like to think that the councillors elected could work as a team and have respect right to the very end of that 3-year term.
I went on mute. We all do it. Thank you very much. So let's get some questions going. As I say, we won't have it necessarily be able to get everybody to answer every question, but we'll see how we can go. Our first question comes from John Tebbit in Meenian. John, you're online. If you would like to ask your question about First Nations and reconciliation. Hello, John.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, hello. Thanks, Colin, and welcome everybody. Welcome to all the candidates. This question is to all the candidates. If you could have some response if you get a chance during this period of time, or maybe think about it for later. I was noticing that in Bass Coast Shire Council last year, they appointed a part-time Aboriginal Development Officer. Their job is to work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander residents, building strong links between them and the council, helping to coordinate cultural and other activities, and to empower them to use their voice while developing a reconciliation plan for the Shire, which I think is extremely important. South Gippsland Shire has roughly the same number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander residents. So would you support the appointment of an Aboriginal Development Officer in the South Gippsland Shire?
Thank you, John. Who would like to have a go first to answer that question? Jenny, you put your hand up first. Thank you. You're on mute, Jenny.
I'm muting with my hand instead, so sorry. Thanks for that question, John. And it is a very important question. And there have been some consultations recently about the pathways for young Indigenous people and what they can expect, what can be expected from what happens to them and for them because of their cultural disconnection, I suppose, and our lack of understanding about the important things for the Indigenous people of our particular location and right throughout Australia. From where I come from is Rockhampton, and there's a settlement outside about 100 kilometres away. So the Aboriginal population is so much more obvious than it is here in South Gippsland. So it's very easy to not make that connection with the Indigenous people. We recognise the land. But I think if there was an Indigenous officer at council, then we would certainly see more contribution from the peoples in the everyday actions that occur in our locations.
Thanks, Jenny. Who else would like to respond to it? Frank and Mick, and then we're going to move on and others can respond in a different way. Frank first and then Mick.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Yeah, look, I've been really pleased over the last few years, the incredible change that there's been in the way that we whiteys, to coin a phrase, have started having a lot more respect for Aboriginal culture and learning a lot more about it, you know, and being aware when you're on Bunurong country or you're in Sydney or in Gadigal country or whatever. And I think it's fantastic that that's coming. I must admit, I was very disappointed in Australia's. I thought we were way behind a lot of other cultures, particularly in New Zealand, in the way they've embraced the Maori. So I think the general concept is certainly worth looking into. Whether we've and I'd certainly be looking to get a report from council and quite possibly going the same way. Whether it's a particularly important issue, as important as others, that's always a difficulty. We've got to look at what's most important to start happening, but it's something that we could address for sure.
Thank you, Frank. Mick.
Thanks, Colin. No, thanks, John. I was born and raised in Dandenong, so we had quite a mixed community, definitely Karry community. I went to primary school, high school, played football with members of the Karry community. I work in Latrobe Valley, which has a population of Karry Torres Strait Islanders of just under 1,500 people. Throughout the Latrobe Valley, South Gippsland, Bass Coast and Baw Baw, there's a total of 5.1% of the population is Aboriginal Karry Torres Strait Islanders. Doing some research, Latrobe Valley has a liaison officer, which assists with the Karry community. Bass Coast, as you said, also has a member there. Baw Baw doesn't. That has 565 members of the Karry and Torres Strait Islander community. The impact would come down whether or not, with South Gippsland having 1.1%, whether or not the council and the ratepayers would be willing to spend that type of money to have a full-time person, as was discussed last night about sharing the roles around with the other councils might be another opportunity. But I do believe that we definitely need at least a part-time person in that position that's available to be able to talk to those people.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
You're welcome. I'm going to keep moving. Mike Salmons in Fish Creek has a question of the candidates. Mike.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everyone. You've all agreed to abide by the Council Code of Conduct, which includes the principles of good governance defined in the Local Government Act 2020. Two of the principles are these. First, the economic, social and environmental sustainability of the municipal district, including mitigation and planning for climate change risks, is to be promoted. The second one that I want to draw your attention to is that priority is to be given to achieving the best outcomes for the municipal community, including the future generations. So my question is, what specific actions will you pursue to help South Gippsland Shire transition through the climate crisis in order to preserve our region for our descendants? And I'm looking for specific actions.
Thanks, Mike. Who would like to respond to that? I'm gonna, David, thank you. Yeah, thank you, David.
Yep, all right. Well, hopefully you can hear me, and thank you, Michael, for this. And I knew something was going to come up about this, or something come up about the welfare and how we got to manage going forward. Here in South Gippsland, most people can't even get their rubbish bins correct and right. You probably know that. I've seen it and everything else like that. And we really have to make sure our recyclables and all the rest are done correctly, because as you know, that's a good starting point in our backyard. And I just like to say that it looks like South Gippsland may be putting its hand up in amongst all of it to actually have a recycling industry here in South Gippsland. And if that does happen and go ahead, it'll bring wealth, it'll bring wages, and it'll also bring people with jobs. And that's so important. Mate, look, we can talk about this all night, but that's a starting point, and we've got to start in our own backyards. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I invite somebody else to speak? And I'll come to you, Mick, in a second. You've already spoken, but I will come back if who else would like to have it to answer the question. Jim.
Look, there are many areas in which council can work to try and mitigate the effects of climate change. One is, of course, and probably the principal one, is in planning. And we have all seen the effects of council's actions in introducing planning conditions on the low-lying land around Port Welshpool and that area several years ago. It changes the values of property. It changes the potential to build dwellings on that property, and therefore impacts on individuals. Like, there's a raft of other things. Council with like 7 years ago replaced all its fluoro tubes to LEDs with a state government grant. Street lamps would be changed as they reach the end of their useful life. You could look at solar energy for swimming pools, sports centres, and all of the buildings that council owns. And they're practical effects. But a lot of the climate policy, to me, is at a federal level.
Thanks, Jim. Andrew, you're on mute, mate.
The reality is that council's got a much wider role than the traditional 1950s version of rates, roads and rubbish. The Local Government Act is very clear. We've got a responsibility for the broad social, economic and environmental development of the area. Critical thing that we need to do is to have a plan of how we're going to adapt. Interesting, I was listening to Peter Walsh, the leader of the Nationals in Victoria, arguing very strongly at the Farmers for Climate Action recent webinar. We need to have a framework and a plan, and we need to be working at all levels of government to achieve the outcome. This, to me, is not going to be a cost. It's in fact going to be a major opportunity. We are blessed for all sorts of reasons. We've got major wind resources that we could provide most of the energy requirements for Victoria. There's potentially 2,000 jobs tied up in 2 wind farms along the coast. We've got major opportunities for carbon sequestration on farms, where on the figures I've seen, we could add something like 30 or 40% to the value of farm production. But to start with, we need to have a plan, and we need to work in collaboration with each other. It is not about what council can do, but council can be a leader and a facilitator in the process of having a just transition.
Thank you. Mick, and then I'll go to another question. Mick?
I'll just keep it short, Colin. Look, the wife and I was out a couple of weeks ago with Spring Clean Your Town. We went to the local skate park. There was plastic bottles, recyclables everywhere. We picked them up, we put them in bags, went to go and put them in a recycle bin. We don't have one. Simple little things like that could be put in place by council, and it's a council responsibility to have a recycle bin for people to put recyclables in. Small things to start with, build up to bigger things. I think that's where we need to look at what we can do now, looking into the future.
Thank you, Mick. We do have a little bit of time. If anybody, any other candidates would like to speak.
Yeah, I think if I can, Colin, a lot of us are attracted to this area because of its natural beauty and because of the nature that surrounds us. And obviously there's parts of it that are letting us down, but there's a lot to be pretty happy about down here. For me, I think there's a lot of talk happens at council level that never actually eventuates into any action. And that's the sort of thing that frustrates a lot of people, frustrates me definitely. So on a practical level, council actually has a tree, you can apply for a grant for trees. Not many people know about it. There's things like that that are already happening that could be expanded. I also think one of the biggest issues that we seem to just brush over is the amount of weeds that could be cleaned up. And council can directly get involved in that as well with the noxious weeds. That's an issue for farmers. It's an issue for the waterways. It's an issue for people on their house blocks, straight out. But if we don't actually stop and think about what it is that we can practically make a difference, nothing will be done, and we'll just talk about it forever. So small things, I agree with Mick on that. Small things, practical, on a local level.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan. I think Frank, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, look, a lot of good things have been said, and I certainly back all of those up. Interesting that you bring up weeds, Nathan, because that's something that I've been very strong about over many, many years. And that's definitely one we can do, and something that I would love to be able to introduce to the Shire. Bass Coast Shire has had for 20 years now a rate reduction policy where people are seen to effectively control their noxious weeds and farm sustainably, and not having landslips and so forth. And that has worked brilliantly there. The state government, because I was in the department, I wasn't directly involved with the people who used to try and do that, and it's never worked very well. The state government really isn't interested, and I think the Shire could do a far better job of that by having a bit of an incentive for it. As for reduce, reuse, recycle, I've been involved in conservation for 45 years, so I'm right on with that sort of stuff. Absolutely, whatever we can do. Thank you.
Jenny.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you, Michael, for your question. For me, my consciousness, I suppose, is always about walking lightly on the earth, leaving very small footprints. And I think any council decisions, any planning, that particular consideration of the long-term impact of the work that we're doing needs to be factored in, and make conscious decisions about what we could be doing, should be doing, and implement some of those strategies into the long-term planning for the Shire itself. And that for me is an area that would work effectively, and taking information and knowledge from people who know more about some of those strategies than we currently have ourselves. So it's doing the research, it's implementing plans and those considerations from the grassroots level straight up.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Michael, for your question. I've got a question from Jack Foster from Ransby, and asked me to read it out, so I'll do that. How would you decide on competing interests and demands from opposite ends of your ward? I think that could be extended to the Shire. There are always competing demands. How do you go about making decisions in that sort of complex context? Jenny, I'll get you go again, then we'll go Frank and Andrew.
Okay. For me, it all comes down to the overall plan that's established for the Shire, and factoring in what's happening in each of those locations, what people would like to see, what are the unique points of difference for each of those locations, and working to that plan within the resources that are available for council. If there's an overarching plan of what would like to be developed and implemented throughout the Shire, if it's united, then it's more likely to attract funding from a number of different areas. So that to me would be the essential part, is factoring all of those things into an overarching plan that we work with and continue to strive to get funding for.
Thank you. We'll go to Frank, Andrew, and Nathan's got his hand up. Frank.
Look, I think Jenny's pretty much stolen my thunder, because clearly to answer this question, we've got to have a genuine long-term plan. We've got to be able to monitor where funding is spent, and be able to demonstrate to those who perhaps aren't going to get any for a while that, yes, you are definitely on the list down the track. We are trying to do the right thing and to get equality across the whole Shire for all of the capital spending in townships, for instance, and for service delivery. I can't see any other way around that, and I'd definitely be looking to have that long-term plan. I believe during the next council session, we will be looking at that issue.
Thank you, Andrew.
The reality is that there's been gross inequality on where dollars have been spent. I've tracked it over the last 20 years. The majority of the money has gone to very narrow areas. What we need to do, is, as Frank was saying, is we need to monitor where the money is being spent in what categories of areas. We have actually got a social blueprint plan that deals with what sort of community services and facilities required. One of the things I think is really essential is that we've got a huge amount of investment in recreational facilities, but there is no, there's no asset management plan for it. We need to actually include an asset management renewal plan for all of those assets so that people can see there's fair and reasonable criteria that are being used and established to operate it. And we need to have the spirit of being accountable and equitable in terms of how we do things and transparent.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Nathan.
We all do it. One of the things that I often get frustrated about in this area, it's not just this area, it's in other levels of government as well, but that I've noticed down here in South Gippsland, is that there's been a lot of plans. There's been a lot of different, things that have been produced for the different townships and communities that have never been acted on. And I wonder how many people have put a lot of effort into that and it's never gone anywhere. And whether people are still feeling like they've been heard or not. But the thing that's evident is what's important to one town is not going to be important to another necessarily, or to another area. I've read on old documents in Lock Village about the Lock Lap, which has been floating around for so long. It will go right past my house. It's not even mowed at the moment, let alone anything else. So that's important to Lock, but it's not going to be important to necessarily other places. So I think that an opportunity to have the voices heard and then listened to and then acted on, rather than just do another plan and then sit it on the shelf and then waste the time and money on that. People would rather the money go straight into something like, if all you need is a swing, just, surely there's a way through small grants that we could just do those things straight up that are important to those communities that need them. Obviously, money does and will get spent in areas where there's more population. It's something that happens, but it's not always the way it should be. So yeah, I think listening, a lot of people just don't feel listened to. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you. I'm going to go to a question from Austin Cram, who's live from GTHO. Austin.
Hey everyone, I thought you don't need to see my face right now. My question, just full disclosure before I ask it, I do work as a planner at a different shire, so that's why I'm sort of seeing things through this lens. So my question, I guess, is prefaced with Karry is seeing a period of renewal with a healthy level of growth and development. And I believe that it's a much more attractive option for facilitating growth and new people into the area than Leongatha. Do you agree? Will you help facilitate this growth? Or do you believe that council should continue to focus on Leongatha as the Shire's centre?
Mick, hand up first.
Got to wait for the hand bit to stop. Yeah, thanks, Austin. Look, I live in Nyora, so that's not too far out of Karry Borough. Obviously, wherever you've got the council building, the meeting place, that's where the money goes. It happens in every single council. The money gets spent where the council buildings are. Then it gets funded out through the other communities. Karry Borough is on the growth. You've got obviously the Karry Borough hub that's getting built down there, so that's obviously a big investment for that town. In Nyora, we're expected to get another 800 homes. If you average that with a family of 2, you're talking 1,600 more people. The infrastructures here are not going to be able to cope with that. So I definitely support that the money needs to be spent outside of Leongatha. It needs to be spent in these other towns and especially the smaller towns, to get them the things they need, the infrastructure they need, so they can live a normal life. You don't have to go to the big town to do that. But we also need to keep that country feeling as well. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but yes, Karry does need some financial assistance, as does some of the smaller towns that have been left out for the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Thank you, Mick.
Yeah, it's like questions actually nearly leading back to the days of the Shire of Karry and the Shire of Warrail. To me, the two towns are very different in terms of the services that they offer. And the reality is that Karry is probably going to grow at a faster rate, just like Nyora and Poowong, simply because of the proximity to Melbourne. Now, what we need to protect is the unique character of each of those towns. And the reality is distance from Melbourne is going to be a major factor. Mick's commented about Nyora. Council would need to spend millions of dollars there over the next 5 to 10 years just on drainage infrastructure, let alone the above ground infrastructure that's needed. And I think we're going to see a shift of that towards the western end of the Shire, and it will be purely driven by the growth in population.
Thanks, Jim. Jenny.
Yes, when I first arrived in Karry in about 2013, all the things that are starting to come to fruition in Karry were on the drawing board at that stage. So it's a bit like what Nathan said about having plans for things to be able to happen. Karry, this growth and development has been on the drawing board since well and truly before 2008. With the Town Centre Framework Plan, the Streetscape, the Karry Community Hub, all of those particular projects. And I know there is some concern about how much money is actually being spent in Karry at the moment, but we've worked really hard to be able to continue to lobby to bring those projects to fruition. They're all just about to come out of the ground, and that's really exciting for this area. But it wasn't really until members of the KRT started to work in a united effort was there real consideration of putting that money into the particular township. And while there's dissension in a lot of different areas, you're not going to get the attention that's justly deserved to some of the other projects. We've worked long and hard for it, and it will be absolutely fantastic for the whole of the Shire to have the development, the infrastructure, the growth, the planning for this particular area. It will complement all the other towns, and it'll be part of a whole destination for many people to come to this particular area.
Frank's got his hand up, then I'm going to move to another question. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Yeah, look, as I've said in some of my literature, I'm very happy to say it again. I understand that the area is going to grow, but I don't think most residents of South Gippsland want the population to grow dramatically. You know, we've all talked about what a beautiful place this is, and most people come here because they don't want to be in suburbia in most cases. Some come specially to farm, of course. And I think we've always got to be very careful of that. I know there are town structure plans for most of the towns, and we need to stay within those, not have too many hobby farms where land isn't utilised very well. But as for the original question of whether development should be moved away from Leongatha towards some of the other towns, absolutely. It's going to happen anyway, as other speakers have said, especially towards our town on this side. I know Locke is very keen to maintain their quaint town image, which is fantastic. And I hope that Nyora will be able to get to a stage where it can have a decent town centre and a vibrant centre in the town, which it doesn't really have now, and still not get too big and sprawling. That'll be enough from me, I think.
Thanks, Frank. I'm going to move on. Sharon and John from Karry asked me to ask a question. Gippsland is a major producer of food for the nation. Agriculture is a major industry here. What will each candidate do to enhance and enable the efficiency of productivity of agriculture here in Gippsland? David.
Just unmute myself. Hopefully you can hear me all. Well, agriculture, like I said to you, is the massive food bowl of South Gippsland and everything else like that. The most important thing we've got to do is get our roads up to standard. That's the biggest thing. You talk to the guys that deliver the fuel, the milk tanker drivers, I know a fair few of them and all the rest. Our roads are absolutely appalling. And yes, some of them are Vic roads, a lot of them are Shire roads, but we certainly need to make sure, fix and remedy and get our road systems right for starters, which will then make it easier for all the trucks and everything to have to get to and from the food source farms, whether it's milk or it's potatoes or things like that. Mate, fix our roads. That's a good start, which will help our farmers.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Nathan, then Jim, and then Andrew.
Thanks. We do farm Highland cattle. It's not really a major farm. It's only a small scale thing, but farming in the area it's our major industry, and you can't get away from that. That's what we're about. Thinking a bit bigger, one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things that I can't get past, is how farmers have got to move their produce all the way across to the other side of the city to have it enter into the logistics and supply chain to be able to get it out where it needs to go. Looking at a bigger, more broad way of increasing our productivity and assisting farmers in the area, I think that a visionary thing to do would be to work with the other municipalities in this area and to look at applying for such a centre down on the eastern side. Everybody always says that the population's on the eastern side of Melbourne, yet everything goes over to the other side for the airport or for logistics. It's ridiculous. But sometimes we've got to think big, and that's actually one of the things that I think we could work toward quite easily. We can't make a decision in this council to do that necessarily, but we certainly can advocate for it as a region. Councillors can do so and continue to empower farmers to be able to, to do what it is that they do best, to be able to produce and have great products. Another thing that I get disappointed at is that the council seems to lack a bit of branding. Which, if we had a proper branding strategy for the region for food and produce, I think that would be a real big boost to our area.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan. Jim, and then we're going to go to Andrew.
Well, I suppose to me, it's very close to my heart because I've been a dairy farmer for 40 years, and just having swung over to beef, of which quite a few people are doing. But the reality is, and everybody said it, that the economic wealth of this Shire is based on agriculture. Yes, we can encourage tourism and all of that, but the bulk of the funding, the wealth of this Shire, is because of our very high rainfall, good soil type, and the farmers. And in my mind, protecting the right to farm is one of the 5 main platforms I'm standing on. The attempted introduction of those local laws a couple of years ago, which were abandoned, was to me such a folly and a failure to recognise that this is a rural area, and that is what we are very, very good at. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew.
Well, I think some of the things have been said. Nathan, I agree wholeheartedly with we need to have better branding. My view is that we're going to be known in the end as the Great Southern Tuscany. We're very similar to that region, got huge potential for small growth and small scale farming, for niche products and for exports. We have got huge potential, which would add 30% to the value of rural production by carbon sequestration in soil. We should have, as some shires are now starting to do, have a rates concession for people who are committed to shift to lower carbon farming. We are going to be in a potentially dangerous situation in Australia if we do not as the National Farmers Federation and the Cattle Council and the Pork Council have recognised, we need to shift to zero carbon farming, or otherwise we face the potential in the future of having carbon tariffs. So in my view, we need to look at branding, we need to look at encouraging small-scale intensive farming, and we need to look at having a rate concession for regenerative farming.
Thank you. Frank, and then Jenny, and then I'm going to go to another question.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, look, there's been some good ideas put up, and a lot of that stuff we can certainly be doing. Another thing I'd like to add to it, and I've already mentioned about the weeds initiative, you know, getting rid of weeds on land is a way to improve productivity, obviously. But the other one, and this relates to what Andrew was saying, is we need to be able to change the size of the land on which people are able to live and make sure that they do manage the land productively. There's too much land around which is between that 4 and 40 hectares generally, which you're not allowed to build a house on, and we have got to fix that, because some of the worst managed land is the land that's owned by people who don't live there. And you know, when I came down here, oh, bloody Melbourne hobby farmers, it was all said, but it's not people from Melbourne necessarily. They're often much more receptive than some of the locals who live somewhere else and don't get their social license on that piece of land, but use it as a runoff block and often don't look after it anywhere near as well as they should. There's a lot of frustrated people out there who'd love to have small scale enterprises of some form or another, which can be highly productive, and they need to be able to live where they work on those lands.
There's me on mute again. Sorry, Jenny.
Thank you. I think one of the other issues that's become far more critical for agribusiness, for farmers, for all areas on land is being able to have accommodation for workers. If you haven't got workers to be able to assist on the property, then it makes it even harder for the farmers. So that's one particular issue. Looking at how much, you know, whether accommodation can be built on properties for a workforce that is likely seasonal or coming and going, transitioning. So that's an area that needs to be considered as well, is the accommodation for workforce.
Thank you. Thanks. Frank, your hand's still up. We've got a question, another question about the climate from Terence Steele, Cardella South. Terence, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. Thank you, all the candidates. One thing I'd like to do is be able to compare candidates, and I thought one easy way to do that is ask a simple question, which is, can you say a number between 1 and 10, which would indicate 1 being little and 10 being a lot, the importance that you put on climate change, looking after the environment, in the decisions that you will make on council?
What I'll do here is give everybody 10 seconds just to sort of have quick explanations as not simply a number.
Okay.
Nathan first.
7. That'll do.
Oh, great. Frank? Frank, you're on mute, mate.
Sorry, got myself unmuted. Yeah, look, I think it's very important. It's we can do a fair bit here, but it's also symbolically important for what effect it has at a higher level for the state and federal governments. And as Jim has pointed out before, some of these things have greater responsibility at that level. And while we can do a certain amount, we can't do the big stuff that they can do, which can really push these issues. So, but look, I'll give it a 7 as well.
Thank you. Mick?
I'm just going to steal Frank's 7 and what he said, pretty much.
Good on you, mate. Jenny?
I see it as a high priority and should be something that's factored into decision making and understanding the impacts of those decisions we make. So I would definitely put it in the realm of about 8 or 9 if we're going to leave something for our future generations.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I'm going to give it between a 7 to 8 for the simple reason is we've got federal and state doing their big bits. And then we've got South Gippsland Shire that can do its bit. Everyone's got to realise that there is a level of what we can and can't do. So between a 7 and an 8.
Thank you. Andrew.
I'd give it a 10. The reality is that we're already suffering the foretaste of damage. Storms that we had are only the foretaste of what's going to occur. We've already got erosion on the coastal area. But let's be really realistic. There are major opportunities in renewable energies, in carbon soil sequestration, regenerative farming. We've got the potential to add 2,000 to 3,000 jobs in the Shire. To do that, we need to have a plan, and we need to have a transition plan put in place with the support of partners in the community.
Thank you. Jim?
I could actually go a 9 on this, but with a rider within budgetary constraints. And we can do as much as possible at a local level, but ultimately it's a federal issue.
Thank you. There've been a number of questions. I'm going to move on. There's been a number of questions around the last council and its aftermath, and it would be inappropriate to ignore that. Andrew, many are asked of you about the last council and the aftermath, and I'd like you to sort of talk about briefly what had you decide to stand. So this is not meant to be a star chamber, but it's not possible to ignore the question. Andrew.
Well, I got on council basically to reform it. There've been growing problems, and it's interesting. I've thought it twice now, and with COVID, I couldn't do it this time. I've spoken to over 2,500 people, and the same themes have come out. There's been concerns about nepotism and corruption in council. There's been concerns about the lack of equity and fairness and where money has gone, and there's been a desire to have a stronger collaborative approach. Now, whatever happens has happened. That's really in the past. What we really need to do is talk about where we're moving forward in the future. I believe that everyone that I've seen who are running are saying they want to work collaboratively and cooperatively. The proof will be in the eating of the pudding in the end. But I want to actually finish what I started to do, which is to have a council that we can be proud of, that we can respect, works very closely with the community, and is seen as a leader, not a laggard. I mean, the reality is, at 31% support, and that's been declining in the last 12 years, it's not just the last council that's problematic, it's the fact that the council was drifting down to a lower level of performance and outcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Frank.
Thanks, Colin. Look, Andrew's not going to say this, which is understandable. So I will, because I'm Frank, as I said. And I was on council for 10 weeks after the mayor the previous year decided she could no longer stay on council. By the time I got on council, I found most of the people there to be not just decent people, but very competent people. You know, and look, I'm not going to name them, but most people will know who was on council at that time. I wasn't the only new one who'd come on. There was another one who'd come on a few months before me. You know, very, very competent person, had great skills. And towards the end of that time, obviously there was considerable scrambling by the council to try and keep itself there, which was ultimately unsuccessful because we know where the power was. But it was a council that was quite functional as far as I was concerned and could have kept going without any difficulty whatsoever.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
Thank you. What everyone's got to realise is there was a massive change of the guard where we got rid of 6 that have been there for way too long, and then there was still 3 others which brought the 9 in. The biggest issue and problem, and people don't realise this, and they should, there was a lot of ex-councillors and ex-councillors behind certain groups, ex-councillors behind certain groups that made it almost impossible for our council to run. And I'm a little bit worried about, there are some, by the looks of it, out there again that are going to be in behind certain candidates. So please, people, vote careful.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. Pee Wee Lewis from Marawata, who's actually president of the round table in Forbes Borough, has a question about vaccines. Pee Wee, you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
You can.
Yeah, I thought you were going to read the question out. I put it in with the written form. Anyway, it was just, I'd like each of the candidates just to note the fact that mandated vaccinations are coming in now for certain groups in our community, particularly our health workers and childcare workers and our teachers. I'd just like to know whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. Straight up, no big speeches, just do you agree with that or not?
So it's a question about, do you agree with mandatory vaccination? I'm sorry, Pee Wee, I didn't realise you wanted me to read it out, or I would have done, obviously. David, start with you.
Yep, all right, I'll go first. Well, it's still up to the individual. I've been vaccinated because apparently if you don't get vaccine, you can't go anywhere. So you've been pushed into a corner anyway. I was quite happy not to get it done, but with me motor racing and want to be involved with more people, I think it's the only way to go forward. Thank you.
Frank?
Sorry, went the wrong way. I was already unmuted. Yeah, look, I find it disappointing that there are so many people who want to put the individual first these days. I thought community was first. That's why I'm running for council, because I want to put back into community. I'm not even going to take the money for it. I'm going to give it back to the community, as most of you will know who've read my stuff. And I find it absolutely staggering that people, the narcissistic way our culture has gone, they think they're more important than the community. So I think if people want to have, we've got to do it via the freedoms, I guess, but where there are industries, the health, where the health of people is involved, yes, it's got to be mandatory in certain cases. It's a shame that it has to be.
Jenny, then Andrew.
I don't believe it should be mandatory for all industry, but I believe for health workers, those at the front line, I think it would be a really good thing for that to happen. I'm an authorised worker. I'm vaccinated. I'm protecting myself. I'm protecting my family, and I'm protecting my community. So, if you're on the front line, I think it's essential to be able to have that vaccination.
Thank you, Andrew, and then Jim.
I'm very sympathetic with the view that we should be dealing with the common good here. I think that there should be some provision for medical exemptions for people, but at the end of the day, if someone's unvaccinated and going around, they can actually cause deaths of people, and that I think is reprehensible. I think therefore people on the front line, as Jenny's saying, should in fact be mandated to cover it. I certainly wouldn't want to be have someone in an aged care facility and have staff who are unvaccinated treating them.
Thanks, Matt. Jim.
Yes, Pee Wee, my background, as you know, is with a science degree. I am all for backing vaccination, particularly not just health workers, anybody in retail, basically anybody that's in contact with another member of the public. So I fully back vaccination.
Thank you. I think, Nathan, we haven't heard from you.
It's not in, this question's not in the remit of council, which I think is, we're going to come across that. But what I've found, look, for those who know, those who don't, I actually worked for the health minister up until I took a redundancy earlier this year. I won't actually answer this question because I don't see that it's something that's going to unite the community. So I'm vaccinated, but I'm not actually going to answer on my thoughts because I don't see that it's relevant. So thank you.
Thank you. Good on you. Mick?
It's a tricky one. You're taking away the person's personal opinion or they're right. But at the end of the day, you've got to think of the greater good. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm a frontline emergency worker. So yeah, look, we need to get this done so we can open up. We can see our loved ones. We can move around. We can travel. You know, I think it should be mandatory.
Thank you. I think I've done everybody. Let me just be sure. Jim, your hand's up. I think I did ask you, I believe. We've got a question from Roger and Janet Powell of Currumbara. They've asked me to ask the question, so I'll do that. Coal Creek is the most underutilised tourist attraction in our ward, not to mention a large cost on the Shire. What will each candidate do to improve the use of this facility? Nick, I'll go to you straight away. Back to you.
Thanks, Colin. Look, I've been to Coal Creek quite a few times. My wife takes part in when the Halloween stuff. It is an awesome place. Simple, easy solution I've got is, why is it free? Why not $1, $2, $5 entry? Why not charge an entry fee that can then go back into Coal Creek to run and keep the place going, rather than come out of the coffers of the ratepayers? It's just a simple thing. People will pay to go to the place. It is brilliant. That's a simple solution.
Thank you. Somebody else? Nathan, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I love Coal Creek. I actually think it's one of the great assets that we've got around here. It's underutilised. I think that there could be opportunities for more community events there, including markets, festivals, possibly even moonlit cinema. There's a whole heap of stuff that could be done there that's not. But I have said I'm not here to push agendas, and that is the case. And I want to listen to other people's ideas. But one idea that I have had for Coal Creek, and I've shared with quite a few people, is that it's a great opportunity to have a space potentially for glamping. There's a lack of accommodation down this way. Tourism is growing, an increasing industry, and mixed right. People will pay. They do pay already big money to go glamping at Wilson's Prom and other places, around the state. There's no reason that we can't tap into that as well.
Thank you. Andrew, Jenny.
Look, Coal Creek has been basically treated as the wicked child of the Shire. The reality is that the losses in Coal Creek have dropped dramatically pre-COVID. I mean, COVID has changed the whole nature of it. It used to lose $800,000 in 2007. It was down to $350,000 3 years ago. The really one thing I agree with Mick, we should think about it, was that Mick talked about having a charging fee for entry. But the one big thing that we did look at, and it's a variation on the glamping, but having a school camp there would in fact halve the losses immediately. And through time, we've been told by School Camps Australia, the school camp there run either by a private operator or by a not-for-profit specialist, within 5 to 7 years we'd be making a profit at Coal Creek. The problem with Coal Creek has been a whipping boy, when in fact the largest loss that we're incurring at the moment is Splash, which is now up to 700,000. So let's stop whipping Coal Creek. Let's start to treat it as an asset that if we reinvested in, we can make a return and build our tourism industry.
Thank you. Jenny, then I'll go to Frank, and then I'll go to the last question before we go to summaries.
I think Coal Creek has a lot of potential, and I think it's really important to remember that the era for Coal Creek is between 1870 and 1920, and it has registered museum status. So being conscious of what that means and the impact that it could have. Coal Creek at the moment, you probably can't see very much about what's happening there, but they have a large following internationally from students, England, America, quite a number of different places. So they've really forged ahead with the education aspect of their operations. But I really like taking a walk through Coal Creek. I think it's very useful to be reminded of our ancestors and how they lived and how simply they lived. And I think it's really important to be able to maintain that for our future generations. But I think there's more that can be done, but I think we need to be conscious of the impact of some of the things that go in there. And there's a real scope of things that could be introduced into Coal Creek to make it more versatile. So that's pretty much, I'm keen to see what its potential is.
Well, thank you. Look, David and Frank, if you could be brief, please go ahead. David.
Thank you very much. What you got to realise is around about 12 to 14 years ago, the Shire spent over $2 million on Coal Creek, and they failed. They wasted it. They didn't control the spending or do it correctly. But also with Coal Creek, there's been lots of things that have been shelved that hasn't been opened up, like Andrew said. You know, school, accommodation, like that's been spoken about so many times. You could hit your head against a brick wall and bleed because everything seems to happen, but we don't get to that next step. Shire just cancels it, put it in a pigeonhole, and costs the ratepayers a lot of money for nothing. Go back and have a look at the costs.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, well, look, it's great to hear so many people so much in favour of Coal Creek. It's a pity we can never get more than about 4 people at a Friends of Coal Creek meeting, eh? But I've been a member of Friends of Coal Creek for many, many years. You know, I've planted some of the trees there that are now 35 years old. And I don't just go there and walk around, although I love doing that as well, but I go there and, you know, help with the building refurbishment. So, yeah, I'm absolutely in favour of Coal Creek. There's no doubt that better things could be done there. But look, I do take your point, David. Money's been wasted there in the past. They've taken away a lot of buildings which should never have happened. That was a terrible time for Coal Creek. But we've got to bite the bullet. There are a lot of good plans out there for Coal Creek. The school camp is clearly one of them, and various other things. We've got to use it a lot better, and there's no question at all, Mick, that we should be charging for it. I do not know why they stopped doing that, really.
Thank you. So there's been a number of comments around over the whole evening around some of the various candidates' responses, and we pass those on to the candidates, just so you know, across the whole of the evening. I have one more question which will go around, get everybody to ask, and then we'll give each candidate an opportunity to sum up. There's been a theme in some of the questions around transparency and knowing, etc. So I ask each of you to consider, how will you keep in touch with your community and share information on how you're making decisions? How will you keep in touch with your community and share information on how you're making decisions? I'm happy to take this as Jenny. Thank you. You've gone first.
Okay. I'm really conscious of the age demographic of our population, with 47% people 50 years and over. So you're looking at a number of different ways of being able to keep that information flowing, and a Facebook page, a councillor Facebook page that's updated on a regular basis about how and why decisions are made. But the other one is the periodic but regular check-in, and it's like a talking point at a local supermarket or common ground, and rotate that throughout the Shire, so that there's a real opportunity for people to come and talk face to face. Of course, COVID permitting is always one of the riders, but you know, rotating it through the Shire and joining with other candidates at those talking points to be able to share with community the decisions that have been made.
Thank you. Great. Jim?
Well, I look at it, we're not a large Shire in terms of population, and I would think that as a councillor, you're pretty much in touch with your community. Now, I've served 3 terms on council, albeit 15 years ago, but in those days, the councillors would go along to, say, your Poowong meeting, your Nyora meeting, your Lock Development Association meeting, Currumbara, Minion, etc. To me, that's part of the role of a councillor, is to be getting out into those community meetings, meetings with sports clubs, single issue discussions about funding and things like that. If we're serious as councillors, then we go and listen to those community groups. They are the strength of this municipality. They know what they want, and we should be trying to assist them.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Frank? Look, I'm going to go to Mick. We've got a bit of a technical challenge with you, Frank. We'll come back to you, Mick.
Thanks, Colin. Look, obviously with COVID, everything's sort of gone online, so it makes it quite difficult. As Jenny raised, that we've got quite a different age group as we go through. So we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got all that type of stuff, but that doesn't get out to the normal everyday person. I'm going to steal somebody's thoughts last night in the forum, and that was about actually taking the council meetings to the local towns. So to come here and have a meeting in Naira, go to Poowong, go down to Fish Creek, get those people involved. We need to get the information out to the community in advance of meetings so they can actually look at it and go, okay, that matters to me. I want to get involved in that. I want to know what's going on. We just need to communicate properly with everybody.
Thanks, Mick. Andrew?
Look, I think it was a tragedy. Council used to have a newsletter that went out 3 or 4 times a year, which allowed a lot of information to get out. I think we should restore that. I agree with whoever was saying that I think we should be having stalls at markets. That's where a lot of the ordinary people go who are not necessarily tied into organisations. To have a booth there where you have staff and the ward councillors, I think makes sense. I'm happy to experiment with things like Twitter and Facebook pages and other things, but at the end, what I did in my commitment, and I've done it over the 2 terms I've been in, I've gone to 10 meetings a month. So I've actually been physically there. I know what's happened in Lock, I know what's happened in Carramburra, in Arrawatta, in Conwack, etc. That's really important, that you're accessible and that you're available and that you'll listen and you'll deal with complaints that you.
Thanks, Andrew. David?
All right, hopefully you can hear me. Mick, you're right on the boil there, but also what I'd like to see is why can't we have day, afternoon or night meetings? I'm sick and tired of the Shire going, oh, it won't work and all the rest. You expect people to stay back and do this, but if we've got a running schedule of what's happening and what's going on, straight away, a day, afternoon and evening meeting will give the opportunities for people to go, oh, I can't make it this month or next month. Look, I can make it there. But also, yes, to go around to the smaller towns is difficult and hard. The Shire's already told me this, I'll ask the question, but it is possible. So I agree that we should have the meetings at different times to give everyone the opportunity. But most importantly, let's fix the Shire's website. How appalling is that to try and find a letter, a newsletter, or what's happening and all the rest? We've got 28 towns on the Shire's website. You should be able to click on it, what's happening, what's coming on, and what to look at for the future.
Thank you. Nathan?
Yeah, I think it's important to get involved in the community groups, absolutely. One thing that I've experienced recently as I've been going around to different groups is just how inviting the various community groups are. And it's very easy to get involved, but a lot of people who might not have something in common with a particular group or feel as though they can just turn up and be welcome because they've never been to anything like that before, often get left out of those opportunities to meet with councillors. One thing that I know from a lot of the work I did in the past is that if you don't create opportunities for people to meet with their elected representatives, less than 10% of the electorate ever say anything at all. And that means it's really hard to get a good understanding of what it is that people want and what they're expecting, and for people to feel as though they're heard. So I'm actually a big fan of roadshows or public forums, or a combination of both, where not just council laws, but also council staff who are often in places where they can make change and make decisions on different things, can also go around and meet people where they're at. Without that, the engagement is so low, and the 10% that do come and engage with council at that point are so eternally frustrated that it's often from a point of desperation rather than from an area where you're going to get a good outcome anyway.
Thanks, Nathan. Frank, can you unmute yourself? And oh, great.
Sorry, I hadn't realised that I wasn't unmuted last time and nobody told me. Sorry, folks. Yeah, look, that's a wonderful round that we've had there. I think we've pretty much got things covered. You know, Jim's definitely right about the going to the meetings, but again, a lot of the people at the meetings, even in different groups, are going to be similar. They're going to be in that 10%, as Nathan has said. I like Jenny's idea of the talking points that could possibly be set up. I think you mentioned supermarkets and some other places like that. Clearly for the youth, we need things such as the channels online. All I'd like to add then is maybe we could save a heap of money by not putting massive ads in a newspaper that not a heap of the population actually reads, and we could redirect a little bit of it more appropriately, perhaps back into the newsletter. I'm not sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Frank. So we come to towards the end of this this forum, and I'm going to invite each of the candidates to take a couple of minutes. I'll be a little flexible, but not too flexible. And we'll go in the reverse order where we started. And just this is the opportunity for you to sum up, respond to something, or emphasise whatever you'd like. So we're going to start with Jim. I'm happy to give you a few seconds, given that you will all be responding to what we've heard as much as what we think. So Jim, when you feel you've had a moment to catch your breath, have a think about this. Couple of minutes, and it'll be Jim, Andrew, David, Jenny, Michael, Frank, and Nathan.
Okay, thanks, Colin. It comes back to the primary roles of local government. And to me, the number one is planning in terms of the residential, industrial areas that we need more of to stimulate growth, protection of the farm zone, etc. Planning is by far the most important function of council. The second most important area I see is to have a balanced budget. And there's been very little discussion on the financial responsibilities of councils in that area. The third thing would be the continuation in terms of ongoing improvement in terms of roads, footpath extensions, which are very much needed, particularly in the smaller towns. The emphasis also should be on community services, so to promote engagement with our communities, regardless of the size of the town, but to assist them to develop the character and the facilities that they want. And of course, finishing off as part of the planning would be the right to farm, for that to be protected. And they're the key issues, as I see, that at a local government grassroots level, we're responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Andrew.
I have a vision of a modern contemporary council that's trusted and respected. It's now a leader, not a laggard in the race that we're in. The reality is that councils have got a much wider role than what's been suggested. Under the Local Government Act, we're responsible for the broad social, economic, and environmental development of the area. We're also responsible for climate planning. We've got those roles should be done. Everyone's talking about trust and respect, but to get there in the end, I think that we need a new form of leadership and a new form of local politics, and one where we all have to change as individuals and learn how to do that. It is not going to be easy. It's going to be tough, but there are some fundamental issues that we need to address in a wider sense that have not been addressed, and it's been a great failure of council in terms of advocacy. Jenny was talking about the housing. We've got a chronic shortage of rental housing. We need a community housing organisation. We need a strategy to attract some smaller scale, more affordable estates. If you look at transport, we are the only shire in the state of the size that we have that doesn't have a local transport service. That is an absolute disgrace. We need to be advocating for that strongly. There is another issue that's sitting around transport. I don't think people realise, but we're going to go from 3 million tonnes of rock and gravel going to Melbourne for construction to 30 million tonnes. That will mean that we're going to have a BW on the main highways every 15 seconds, 24 hours a day. We need to look at transport, rail transport in the end with an integrated rail trail and transport. There are other things that we need to look at. Like we've got a range of neighbourhood houses and community centres, but it's uneven. We've got 12 covered, but there's nothing in Lock at the moment. There's nothing in nothing in Poowong. There's nothing in Meenian. There's nothing in Fish Creek. We need to bite the bullet. That is really an essential part of allowing a community to have a heart. But in the end, it's really about whether we're willing to, if you like, bury the hatchet metaphorically, stop this game that's been played out, and start to say that we've all got a responsibility to work in harmony, to work in mutual respect, and all learn how we need to have a new form of leadership that can build trust and respect in the community.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I appreciate you spreading out your words towards the end there. Thanks a lot. David.
Good evening, voters. Please remember, I'm here to be your voice and for the future of South Gippsland. A couple of things I want you to realise is the Shire, we need to make it a business, and a business that works and strives well. Like I said at the start, I'm very worried about blowouts and costing us money. Just sign another cheque. The rail trail, $250,000 over budget already. You ask yourself, why? Why is this happening? So what we've got to do, and we've got to have a look at, when you look at the budget, if you can understand it, you're doing well. But one point I want you to look at, in 2019, they had 274 workers in our Shire. In 2022 budget, there's 254 workers full-time. That's how the Shire does it. Their wages are up $2 million. $2 million at 20 less people. So we've got to have a look at that. My recovery, my ideas, my thoughts, the way to move forward for a happy council is for us to all be honest and be respectful. Now, when I say that I'm an independent, I'm an independent. I'm not backed by anyone, and I'm definitely not helping anyone to get anywhere. So please, when you vote, be very, very careful who you're voting for, what you're voting for, and vote with a passion. Vote one for David Amell and Strzelecki is so, so important. One other thing is, when you have a look around at our Shire, look how many contractors the Shire is now paying. Why haven't we got full-time workers doing our job, local people working in our Shire, when we've got contractors coming from other shires or from outside the Shire area? Remember, with COVID, a lot of these people, thank you, a lot of these people can't come and work. So we've got to change and work out, and let's use the people that are in our Shire for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Jenny.
Thank you, Colin. It's interesting to see the flavour of the meeting here tonight in comparison to the Coastal Prom Forum last night. It's been interesting discussion, interesting debate, and I think there's a really good mix of people who can really take South Gippsland Shire in the right direction in the future. When I was looking at standing for council, I looked at the definition of politics and politician, because I really didn't like those words because of the way they get interpreted and the way other politicians behave. So politics and politician were pretty much dirty words until I read the definition. And fortunately, politics and politician is exactly what the role of a councillor would be. I'd just like to see better practice at it, that's all. Okay, so I don't want to repeat of the previous council. South Gippsland deserves so much better. Good leadership with community focus, integrity and commitment, better representation, and an overall plan for the whole Shire. Planning for future growth in this area that includes managed land development and infrastructure needed to make this area thrive. The role of councillor is achieving the best outcomes for the municipal community, including future generations. That's what I will work for. I work hard, I give 100% to all tasks I take on, and I promise commitment, integrity, leadership, and community to Corranborough, Strzelecki and South Gippsland Shire. Vote 1, Jenny Karry.
Thank you, Jenny. Mick?
Thanks, Colin. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I'll strive to do required to get the council back on its feet moving forward, to ensure that council focuses on local government services and where required advocates on behalf of the community regarding state level issues, to unite those elected for the betterment of the Shire, to respectively work with the CEO, Karen Ellis, employees of council, internal and external stakeholders, community groups, and you, the community members, the voters, the ratepayers, now and into the future. We need to leave the egos at the door, consult with the community and get the job done. As we are elected to do so, a voice of the community for the community, that is what I say. Vote 1, Michael Patrick Felton, number 3 on the ballot. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, Mick. Good on you. Frank. Frank, you might still be on mute, mate.
Yeah, no, I'm getting there.
Good on you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, I'd just like to concentrate a little more on discerning between the councillor group, which we've talked about a lot, and the actual council itself as it comes across to the people in the community. And that's something that wasn't touched on last night and hasn't really been talked about tonight at all. And unfortunately, with many of the people I deal with or that who speak to me on these matters, if they've had interactions with council, it often isn't a very pleasant experience. And I'd love to be able to work on that relationship. I was a public servant for 30 years, and I always took the responsibility for anyone that I spoke to, that I would follow things up. I would make sure they got done in an appropriate time and that the customer would be happy and contented that the Ag Department was doing the right thing. And I reckon with a lot of the things that other people have said, they're all fantastic. We want to do all those things, but if we can't get to a situation where a lot of the people are saying, yeah, I had to contact council and I got a good result from it. I didn't necessarily get everything I wanted, but it was done well, it was done professionally, and it was done quickly enough. So that's what I'd like to be able to contribute greatly to if I get on council, is to getting that much better feeling of the community towards their council. And if we can do that, we will have done a heck of a lot of those other things that people have talked about. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Nathan.
Thank you, and thanks again for facilitating the night. I suppose is the it's a good opportunity for all of us. So thank you. For me, my focus, and I've said this before, but I will reiterate it. My focus is on supporting businesses, supporting farming, on increasing tourism in our local area, which I think is a big part of also increasing employment opportunities. Looking at local services, including recreation, roads, parks, gardens, social hubs, and working to protect and enhance our local environment. For me, this is a opportunity to continue to serve. It's what I have done for quite a long time, and I really enjoy serving the community. I want to be able to give everything that I can in this role, in what I think is a new and exciting opportunity, whilst also looking at the culture of council and how it's been operating, and bringing that around to be a service model rather than being a avoidance kind of operation, which I think a lot of people feel that it is. The councillors and the council as a service should be outward focused and empowering our community. I think that's really what it's about. All these different townships and hamlets and larger towns that we have all have their own needs, and they'll have their own individual groups that have things that are important to them. But if council is outward focused and empowering those communities and also empowering businesses across the municipality to do better, I think that as a whole we will succeed and be in a much better place in the future. A community plan should be developed that is in the best interest of everybody, not just in the interests of some and not in others. And personally, I want to use my skills that I've got, my tenacity and advocacy, understanding of how to complete projects and deliver funding for important things in our area. On indulgence, I haven't put out a how to vote card. I decided not to do so, as some other candidates have done so. I actually just want to point out that you don't have to vote by somebody's telling you to vote. I'm a big supporter of democracy, and I like to call it choose your own adventure. So put one, I'd like one for me, but I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, that's fine. But put one wherever you like and then do the rest in whatever order you see is best. Not in the way that somebody is telling you to vote, because if you put a number in every box in sequential order, it is a valid vote. And a lot of people my age don't understand that because our education system has let them down. So I think it's worth reiterating.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you all.
Thank you.
So come to a close, a rich conversation, testament to the quality of candidates and the quality of people online. We had over 80 people at one stage, and then a few people really politely sent us messages while they couldn't stay, and we still got nearly 70 people. So Jen and I thank you. We've had to balance questions, and there are a couple of questions that didn't get asked, and for that we apologise, but we were trying to keep the topics somewhat balanced across the ward. We will send all questions that haven't been answered to all candidates, and they can respond. Jen, thanks so much for hanging out here. It may look a little smooth here, but I can tell you there's chaos around the table here as we've been printing out questions, trying to sort them out and make it work. For anybody who had felt that they weren't heard properly, I really do apologise. That was not our intention at any stretch. Please, again, thank you all for being here tonight on behalf of Jen and I. Jen might just want to say something.
Thank you to the candidates, and thank you so much to the community for being here tonight. And hopefully now you're more informed about all of the wonderful candidates in order to vote.
Thanks, everyone. Have a safe and good evening. Good on you. I feel a bit bad about that one about the yeah.
Thanks, guys. If you can hear David Amor, I appreciate it, and well done. And that was good. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Good on you, mate.